Welcome, everybody, to Tino's Time. It is finally here. It's championship week, baby. If you made the championship in your fantasy football playoffs, I'm here. Your boy Tino is here to help you. Take home that championship, take home that ring, take home all the money from your friends, and take home the bragging rights for the next 6 months until the 2022 fantasy football season starts. So, before we start previewing championship week, let's go back to week 16 and let's recap everything that went down in the NFL fantasy football semifinals. Before we get started on that, don't forget to go smash that like button, that subscribe, go follow, go help your boy Tino out. Go follow at Tino Time 1996 on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, everywhere you follow your social media, and just give your boy Tino a like and subscribe and get all your fantasy football needs. So let's not waste any more time and let's get into all the action that went down in week 16. Oh my God, Joe Burrow and the Bengals put on an absolute show. If you were lucky enough to draft Joe Burrow later in the rounds and you took him and you started him in the semifinals because of all the COVID outbreaks and all the injuries, he went crazy. He had 525 yards, 5 touchdowns. T. Higgins went off for over almost 200 yards, 12 receptions, and a couple touchdowns. Jamar Chase got involved. Even Tyler Boyd got involved. Joe Mixon put up 31 fantasy points. The whole Bengals offense just exploded. So if you had them, they probably led you to the championship. The playoff picture in the NFC and the AFC is wild. With the extra team added like they did last year, we don't know who's going to be in the playoffs, and to be honest, in the NFC, it's taking 10 losses to get eliminated, and that's just crazy to think that a team could really have 10 losses and make the playoffs. These last 2 weeks of the NFL real season, not fantasy, is going to be crazy. But back to fantasy, it's championship week, baby. There's no more mistakes. There's no more next week. There's no more. It's down to this week, week 17 of the NFL fantasy football season. It's time to take home the championship, take home all that money, and take home all the bragging rights. So, before we start previewing championship week, let's go back and let's recap everything that went down in week 16. And let's talk about this Monday night game, because if you were lucky enough, like I was, to pick up the Dolphins defense, they absolutely put on a complete show. The Dolphins beat the Saints on Monday night 20-3, and the Saints had 21 players on the COVID list. And I didn't mention it in the headlines, but these injuries in the COVID list is just ridiculous. I heard something on the news this morning that there was over 90 players added to the COVID list this morning, and that's just crazy to think about, that all these players and all these teams are losing guys left and right, and on a daily basis, we don't even know who's going to start. I mean, the leading receiver for the Buffalo Bills was a guy that wasn't even started in 1% of leagues in fantasy, and he just went off and had a complete show. But in this game on Monday night, Tua Tagovailoa, he didn't have a really good game. He had 198 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. But the guy he threw it to the most, if you had him, Jalen Waddle, has been an absolute stud all season long. He had 10 receptions for 92 yards, but he did have a touchdown, and he put up 20-plus points. And hey, on Monday night, I'll take that all day long. That defense, though, I just mentioned it. They had 8 sacks. They had a pick 6. They made Ian Book look like a guy that was in high school. The defense was just phenomenal, and they put up 25 fantasy points. So on Monday night, if you had Waddle and that defense, you were feeling real good, and they probably led you to championship week. On the other side of the ball, though, Ian Book, he just did not have a really good game. He couldn't seem to get going. The Dolphins just made him look, like I said, like a high schooler. He had 135 yards, 2 interceptions, and even Alvin Kamara couldn't even help the case. He only had 52 rushing yards. He only had 2 receptions and 7 yards receiving. And, it's one of those things that hopefully Taysom Hill or Trevor Siemian can get cleared to play this upcoming week. But I would really be worried about Alvin Kamara going in next week in championship week if Book if Book is the quarterback, because what are we going to do? Rely on Alvin to get 6 points in championship week? That ain't going to do it. We're going to talk about it on the 3 things that I learned a little bit later on, but you got to stop looking at the name and you got to look at production. There's going to be a lot of guys I talk about on here that you might need to sit, and that's just because it's the last week. There's no next week. If you lose, you take second place, and that's no fun. We want to take home that ring. So you got to start your lineup and make sure you start everybody that's going to put up big numbers. Little Jordan Humphrey was the leading receiver for the Saints. We thought it was going to be Marquez Callaway. We thought maybe, I really wasn't looking forward, and I really wasn't starting any Saints besides Alvin Kamara. But little Jordan Humphrey had 5 receptions and 70 yards. And, he looked like he was Book's favorite receiver, and we'll have to see. But to be honest, people, I really don't want to rely on Humphrey going into the championship week. And, with everything going on in COVID and everything, we just might need to. But the only way I'd be looking at Humphrey is if you are in a super flex or in like a 12 or 14 team league. And that was the Monday night game. Like I said, the Dolphins won 20-3. It really wasn't competitive. The Dolphins defense just put on a show. It would have been 13-3 if it wasn't for the pick 6. And it just, with the COVID and with all of the injuries going on, it's just really bad. And it just sucks because I hate seeing it later on in the season, like we are seeing. All these teams have injuries and not seeing these games competitive because none of the big names are on the field. But speaking of injuries, these injuries just continuously pile up. And last week, there were so many names out that in one of my leagues, I beat my cousin because he had Travis Kelce out. Jonathan Taylor didn't have a good game. Cooper Kupp didn't go off what he usually does. A.J. Brown, there's so many things and there's so many injuries that he was the top guy the whole season. And the other guy in the top of my league, he went 11-3, and he didn't have Austin Eckler, Darren Waller, Chris Godwin. And these injuries have been absolutely crazy to big names this year that we are relying on guys that we didn't even think we would be in the playoffs. Travis Kelce was out because of COVID. He did not clear the concussion protocol. The COVID list protocol. I'm sorry, not concussion. Hopefully Travis Kelce will be back if you made it and you survived the semifinals. Darren Waller, we have not seen him in a minute, and I don't know if he's going to play this week. And there's going to be some tight ends. I'll let you know a little bit later on when we get the starts and sits and stuff like that. But I don't know if we can really rely on Waller. The Bills receivers, Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis, all went on the COVID list. We saw Isaiah Mckenzie when we talk about the studs of the week in a little bit after we talk about the disappointments. Isaiah Mckenzie was the leading receiver for the Buffalo Bills besides Stephon Diggs and Dawson Knox, and he just put on a show. But the Bills receivers, they all went on the COVID list, and hopefully they are able to get back. But if they're not, I definitely think about starting Isaiah Mckenzie this week. Mike Evans, he was also placed on the COVID list, and we'll have to see what happens. And like I always say every week, I record on Tuesdays, and with all these injuries and with everything going on in COVID, you need to check every day and check daily because you don't know who's going to be on the list and who's not. The running backs, though, James Robinson tore his Achilles. He was finally getting going, and he was finally becoming that guy that we drafted later on because Travis Etienne that was out for the season, and James Robinson ended up becoming the lead back again. But James Robinson now will be out for the season after tearing his Achilles. And yes, there's only 1 week left in the fantasy football season, but you never want to see anybody tear his Achilles. And to be honest, this could be a year-long injury, and he did it in week 16, so that means he could be out all season next season. So we might need to keep an eye on that running back from Clemson that the Jaguars drafted last year that is with Trevor Lawrence, because he could be the running back for the Jaguars in 2022. CEH, they thought it was a collarbone injury, but now they're calling it a bruised shoulder, so hopefully he will be able to play. But if not, you need to go pick up Daryl Williams, and he's a very good start this week. Miles Sanders is out with a hand injury, and it doesn't look like he's going to be playing this week, so Boston Scott or Jordan Howard are 2 options that you need to go pick up off the waiver wire. Daryl Henderson Jr. has a knee sprain, and he is out 3 to 5 weeks, so that means you need to keep Sony Michel in your lineup if you have him, if you've been sitting him, if you've been starting him, keep him in your lineup because he's going to keep doing his thing. David Johnson went on the COVID list, and like I said, these COVID list injuries are ridiculous, and it's just one of those things that we always have to worry about. So keep an eye on the injuries for the running backs and all of the COVID list, just everything. Because like I said, you need to keep an eye on it daily, especially going into championship week, because you don't want to be starting a guy on the COVID list. And there was a guy in one of my leagues, he started James Conner, and he didn't realize he was out, and that costed him his week. So always make sure to check on your injuries. Now let's talk about the quarterbacks that are on the injury list. Taysom Hill did not play because of COVID. Trevor Siemian was also placed on the COVID list. That's why we saw Ian Book play last night versus the Dolphins, and hopefully one of them can be cleared, because that would definitely help the Saints playmakers and Alvin Kamara. So we'll have to see, and like I always say again, make sure and keep an eye on it daily. And I'm going to keep repeating it every single second of every single time of this episode, because you want to make sure that your lineup is set and you have healthy players in going into championship week. Lamar Miller and Tyler Huntley did not play. Josh Johnson, though, put on an absolute show. And my friend that made a good point that, with all of this COVID stuff going on, it gives guys like Josh Johnson and stuff like that opportunities that maybe they wouldn't get. So, as bad as all this COVID stuff is and everything, maybe it is a good thing to see what these older guys and what these guys that we thought we wouldn't see play have, and maybe they could get a second chance in the league. But please, Lamar Miller, come back, because we need you. Or not Lamar Miller, I'm sorry, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, come back. Lamar Miller, I don't even know what team you're on. But Lamar Jackson, please come back soon. Well, let me tell you this. One person on the Ravens that it doesn't matter who the quarterback is Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is quarterback proof, and he needs to be in your lineup every single week, which he should be. And next year, honestly, people, and I'm thinking about it, depending on where you drafted him and depending on how your league works with keepers, I would definitely consider keeping Mark Andrews, because he's proven that he's quarterback proof, and he's proven that he's one of the best tight ends in the league. So make sure Mark Andrews is in your lineup this week. Jimmy Garoppolo has a thumb fracture, thumb sprain, thumb everything, and it doesn't look like, and the 49ers aren't very positive that he's going to play this week. So it looks like it's Trey Lance's time to prove that he could be the quarterback of the future, and he can lead the 49ers to a playoff berth. So if Jimmy G is out, and I'm not telling you to go out and start Trey Lance, but if you're in a 2-quarterback league, if you're in a super flex league, if you're in a 14-team league and you're struggling with quarterback, and maybe you're just starting guys and you're streaming quarterbacks and you don't know what to do, I would definitely consider starting Trey Lance versus the Texans this week, because, with his running ability and everything, I just think that Trey Lance could be a really good option, but only in deeper leagues. Don't be crazy if you're in like an 8-team league, and don't be starting him over like Aaron Rodgers and Justin Herbert. And don't be crazy, people. It's championship week. Start your studs. Speaking of the studs, we'll get to the studs in a minute, but let's talk about the guys that were straight up disappointments this week. And if they were and you had them on your team, you probably didn't advance, and you're sitting at home wondering, what could I have done wrong, or what could I have done right, or what could I have done the other way that these guys wouldn't have costed me going to the championship. Let's start off with the tight ends. George Kittle only had 4.1 points, and after a few phenomenal weeks, George Kittle slowed down a little bit. But, with that was because of Jimmy Garoppolo's thumb injury and everything going on with the 49ers. And depending on who starts at quarterback, I'm not telling you to sit George Kittle. You're not going to sit George Kittle if you made it to championship week, but just don't expect 30 points. But hopefully I'm wrong, and he scores 30 points, and he has a banana-type game, and we just all celebrate next week. Rob Gronkowski had 3.3 points. Tom Brady couldn't get going as well as we thought he was. He didn't have as many receivers, and he didn't have all the playmakers that we're used to seeing him have, and Gronkowski just didn't get involved very much. He only had 3.3 points. Noah Fant was a big play for everybody this week, and he only had 6 points, and that really ain't going to do it for me, Noah Fant. I'm sorry. But I think that has a lot to do with Drew Lock, and Drew Lock is just not the quarterback that we all hoping that he could be. Oops, I kind of lost my train of thought for a second. Hunter Henry was one of those guys that was doing phenomenal things at the tight end position, but that was because he was getting touchdowns. He got touchdowns 4 out of 5 games, but ever since he hasn't got the touchdowns, we see how much touchdowns help, especially with the tight end position, because that's all we hope for the tight end position. He only had 1.9 points, and honestly, people, I don't know if I'm going to be able to trust Hunter Henry this week, but we'll get into more of that when we talk about the starts, sits, and streams. The wide receivers that struggled, Van Jefferson had 1.6 points. Russell Gage had 5.9 points after his phenomenal week. Keenan Allen had 7.5 points. And Keenan Allen has been phenomenal all season long, but Justin Jackson, we'll be talking about him in a second with the studs of the week. He put on an absolute show, and if you're able to get him Sunday morning after Austin Eckler told you to, and Austin Eckler was ruled out, Justin Jackson went out and put up 34 points, and he led you to a championship, just like he did with me. CD Lamb only had 10.4 points, and the Dallas Cowboys made the Washington football team look like they were a high school team playing on a Friday night under the lights. I don't know what it was with the Cowboys. They might really be them boys, and maybe we see them boys in the Super Bowl this year. Hopefully not, but CD Lamb didn't have a very good game. People, this guy has helped me, and he was a big reason on why I'm in the championship, and after Derrick Henry got out, Cordell Patterson has been that guy the whole entire season that has been very productive, very consistent. But the last 3 out of 4 weeks, he really hasn't been very good. And it has a lot to do with, yes, the Falcons' offense. But I'm very worried about starting Cordell Patterson in championship week versus the Buffalo Bills. And I'm considering sitting him depending on what happens throughout the week. And honestly, the only way I would consider starting him is if you're completely desperate, or maybe if the Buffalo Bills lose 20 defensive players. But I'm really worried about relying on Cordell Patterson going into championship week. And he only had 8.3 points. But if you take away that 3-yard touchdown that he had, or 6-yard touchdown, he would have only had 2.3 points, and 8.3 points ain't going to do it for me in championship week. Jonathan Taylor at 10.5 points, and he has been the best running back in the game, and he just had an off game versus the Cardinals, and he was eventually going to happen, and it just sucked. It happened in the semifinals. Hopefully you didn't get eliminated because of that, but if you did, I'm sorry. But Jonathan Taylor must be a big keeper next year in keeper leagues. And honestly, he might be the first or second pick in a lot of fantasy football leagues next year. A guy that's going to fall a lot next year is Saquon Barkley. He just does not get going. And Devin Booker has been better, honestly, even when Saquon has been involved. And Saquon is just not the guy that we thought he was going to be. And it really bothers me because he's drafted so high and he fell in a lot of leagues. But honestly, people, I think he could fall in the 3rd or 4th round next year. But again, we're saying this now, and it could all change, and he could go be the comeback player of the year. So we'll have to see. But honestly, people, depending on where you draft next year, I really wouldn't consider drafting Saquon very high. And yes, I'm talking about next year a lot, but that's also because for the people that are eliminated and they still want to listen to your boy Tino, I got to help you throughout the episode and give you information, because if you have been eliminated in the playoffs and you're not in the championship week, you better be doing your scouting for next season. Baker Mayfield had 8 points. He threw 4 interceptions on Saturday night. It was just awful to see. I started him in a super flex league, and thank God for Josh Allen putting up 40 fantasy points, because Baker putting up 8 points just did absolutely nothing. I would have been better starting off Big Dick Nick Foles that pulls off some type of an upset, and I don't even know how the Bears won that game, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. Matthew Stafford, another one. He threw 3 interceptions, and he just, Matthew Stafford has been very good all season long and everything like that. But, it's just one of those things that going into championship week, I don't know if I'm going to be relying on Matthew Stafford leading me to a championship. And I just don't know if I'm all about that. But now that we talked about all the disappointments and all the guys that costed you your week, and hopefully you had some of these guys that saved you and you were able to move on, because I had a couple of these guys and they definitely helped me move on, because I had Cordell Patterson, I had Clyde CEH that got hurt too, and it was not okay. And like I said, these injuries have been absolutely ridiculous all season long. But now that we talked about the disappointments, let's talk about the studs of the week and the guys that just went off and went bananas on Sunday or Monday or even last Thursday. Let's talk about last Thursday, though, because the return of A.J. Brown. This guy went berserk on Thursday night. If you've been holding on to him all season long, he went out and had 11 receptions, 145 yards, and 1 touchdown. And starting off on Thursday night with 31.5 fantasy points was feeling real good. And if you had A.J. Brown, you probably moved on to the championship week. We talked about this guy in the headlines, and let's just talk about him again. Joe Burrow went bananas. He had 525 yards, 4 touchdowns, 56.6 fantasy points. This man almost had 60 fantasy points. If there was an extra quarter, he might have put up 70 because everybody on the Bengals offense was catching the ball. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, CJ Uzomah, Jamar Chase, everybody. And it was berserk and it was crazy. But the guy that went crazy the most was T. Higgins. This guy has been a saving grace for many people in fantasy football this year. He went off for 12 receptions, 194 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 43.4 points. The Bengals receivers all went nuts. Jamar Chase had 15 plus points. Tyler Boyd had a touchdown. CJ Uzomah had about 8 points. And the whole Bengals offense is a Bengals offense that you need to start versus the Chiefs in championship week. And if you have Joe Burrow, don't you dare think about taking him out of your lineup. And don't take T. Higgins out of your lineup, because if you have both of them, those two are going to lead you to a championship. I mentioned it in the headlines and I said it a little bit early on. Isaiah Mckenzie was the last guy I thought in the semifinals would be putting up numbers like this. I thought Stephon Diggs would take all these points, with Cole Beasley and Gabriel Davis being out. Dawson Knox was involved, but Isaiah Mckenzie had a T. Higgins type of day. And if you had T. Higgins and for some reason you got lucky and you started Isaiah Mckenzie, these guys put up 70 plus points together. Isaiah Mckenzie had 12 receptions just like T. Higgins. He had 125 yards and he had 1 touchdown. And he put up 29.4 fantasy points. And again, we'll be talking about it in a little bit about the things that I learned this week. And again, Isaiah Mckenzie is like the last guy I thought we'd be relying on in the fantasy semifinals. Justin Jackson is another guy. I talked about him a second ago. He went bananas. Austin Eckler told you to pick him up. Jeff Miller in the morning on ESPN radio told you to pick him up. And he was one of the guys that, I didn't think he was going to do these type of numbers, but he had 64 receptions, or 64 rushing yards. I'm sorry, not receptions. If that was 64 receptions, that'd be crazy. But he had 64 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 8 receptions for 98 yards, and he put up 34.2 fantasy points. And Justin Jackson, if you were able to grab him off the waiver wire on Sunday morning, Saturday night, whenever Austin Eckler was ruled out, he definitely led you to a championship like me, and you're feeling real good. But hopefully Austin Eckler returns, and if you have Austin Eckler, then start him, obviously. But if for some reason Austin Eckler is not able to clear the COVID protocol, Justin Jackson might be a very good start this week, and he might do the same types of things, and you might be like, what? I'm starting Justin Jackson in the in the championship? Yeah, if he's starting and Austin Eckler is out, you start him this week. Devonta Adams has been a guy that's been putting up numbers every single week, and on Saturday was absolutely no different. He had 10 receptions, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 33.4 fantasy points. And Devonta Adams, him and Aaron Rodgers might be on their last dance, but if they go somewhere together, those two could be the deadliest force, like Tom Brady and Randy Moss back in 2007 when they almost went 19-0, but we had the helmet catch, and we all know how that turned out. Josh Allen had 314 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 60-plus rushing yards, and 43.24 fantasy points. And if you had Josh Allen, you are feeling real good, and you're probably going to the championship. Joe Mixon, we talked about him also in the headlines. Every single Bengals offensive player just had himself a game, and Joe Mixon was no different. He had 65 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 receptions, 70 yards in the receiving game, and 1 touchdown. He put up 31.5 fantasy points. And again, like I said, I'd start all your Bengals this week because it's going to be an absolute show with the Bengals and Chiefs, and I just think that game's going to be awesome, and we'll be talking about that game later on when we talk about Fantasy Gold. Dak Prescott on Sunday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys really are them boys, and they put on a show versus the Washington football team, and Dak Prescott was taken out after the third quarter, and he still put up 45.9 fantasy points, and depending on how your scoring is, he put up 30 plus fantasy points. So Dak Prescott, if you had him this week, I definitely consider starting him. And the Cowboys, again, maybe they really are them boys. Maybe we really got to take them seriously, and maybe they really are going to the Super Bowl. I really hope not, people. I don't want to see the Cowboys. It's going to be like the Cowboys and Patriots in the Super Bowl, and we don't want that. We want to see a competitive game, and we don't want to see a game that the NFL wants to see. The last guy in studs of the week that we're going to talk about is Brian Pringle. Tyreek Hill didn't have a very good game, and he was kind of limited all week in practice, and he really didn't get involved too much. He only had 2 receptions for 17 yards, I think it was. It was either 7 or 17, but he just did not have a really good game. Well, Brian Pringle had 6 receptions, 75 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and had 25.5 points. So again, if you were lucky enough for some reason thinking, ooh, let me take a flyer on Brian Pringle, then you're probably feeling real good, and you're going into championship week being like, oh yeah, I got some humble brags, and I got, just this and that. So those are the 10 studs of the week and the guys that helped you, lead you to championship week. And if you were facing some of those guys, I'm sorry if you didn't make it. But like I said, there's always time to scout for next year. And hopefully your league does where, at least if you made the top 4, at least maybe you're playing for something for 3rd place. So still set your lineup this week and still be involved, because 3rd place, at least like in my league, I have it where you get your fees paid for the following season. And hey, I think that's okay and that works. And, it's a fun way to do it. So even if you're playing for 3rd place, still set your lineup and don't be that person that doesn't set your lineup. But now let's take a second, and your boy Tino is going to do some of his my bads and humble brags and the stuff that I got right that happened in week 16 and the things I got wrong that happened in week 16. And hopefully you listened to me about the things I got right. And hopefully you didn't listen to me about the things I got wrong, because if you did, I'm sorry. Let's start off with the my bads. Russell Gage went out and had an absolute game a couple weeks ago, and then he puts up an absolute dud this week. Russell Gage, just thanks a lot for costing me this week. And, the Lions and Scotty Miller was somebody I told you to flex last week, and I thought with all of the Buccaneers receivers out, I thought, that Scotty Miller might get involved. But Antonio Brown got 10 receptions, 100-plus yards, and scored 20 fantasy points. So hopefully you were able to pick up Antonio Brown, and Scotty Miller was just a deep, deep sleeper. And, we can't always get those right. Gabriel Davis, this is a big reason on why you need to focus on the waiver wire and focus on the COVID list injury. Because like I said in the headlines, 90-plus players have been put on the COVID list as of Monday and Tuesday. We don't know who's going to be playing daily. And if you had Gabriel Davis in your lineup, hopefully you were able to go out and get Isaiah McKenzie, and you took advantage of those 25 fantasy points. And again, if Gabriel Davis and Cole Beasley are out this upcoming week, then I would definitely keep Isaiah McKenzie in your lineup. But I'm sorry if you didn't do that and you had Gabriel Davis still in your lineup after he was ruled out. Trevor Lawrence and the Browns quarterbacks, I told you to stream those 2 last week, and it just did not work out. Trevor Lawrence just didn't get going, and Baker Mayfield just was awful. Maybe they should have put in Nick Mullins at some point, because 4 interceptions is just ridiculous, Baker. And you still had a chance to win the game, and you still threw another interception. Now let's get into the things that I got right, and let's do a little bit of a humble brag, and let's get rid of all the negativity, because we talked about disappointments and the my bads, and we don't want that on Tino's time. We want to be positive. So let me take a second and let's do some humble brags. Rojo, Ronald Jones put up 16.5 points with Leonard Fournette being out, and Ronald Jones gets to go up against he gets to go up against the Jets this week in the championship week. So if you have Ronald Jones and you're keeping hold on to him, or if he's still on your waiver wire, go pick him up and start him versus the Jets this week. Amon St. Brown has been the best receiver on the Lions, and I can't even believe we're relying on a Lions receiver and a Lions player in general. But he's been phenomenal. He's been putting up double digits the last 3 out of 3+ weeks. And honestly, this week, going up against Seattle, the Lions might be playing. And, Tim Boyle was the quarterback last week. And we talked about Mark Andrews being quarterback proof. Amon St. Brown is the same. So start St. Brown this week versus the Seahawks. Dawson Knox and Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz didn't have a phenomenal game, but he put up double-digit points. And then Dawson Knox got a touchdown. And as long as, Cole Beasley and Gabriel Davis are out with Isaiah McKenzie, Dawson Knox and Stephon Diggs, I think that's a perfectly good 3 receivers that the Bills can use advantage of. So if Cole Beasley and Gabriel Davis are out, or even if they're in, I'd still can start Dawson Knox this week, and he just went out and had an absolute show. Welcome back to fantasy football, Kyler Murray. He put up 20+ points when we needed you the most, and thank you very much. Jalen Hurts you are like a running back, quarterback, and I love that you run the ball in and you act like a quarterback because I'll take rushing yards from a quarterback all day long. So if you're able to get Jalen Hurts, you're probably feeling real good as a running back, quarterback. But if you listen to me and you started all those guys and you listen to what I had to say last week, then you're sitting in championship week and you're feeling real good. But those are my humble brags and my bads for week 16. And the last thing we want to do before we start previewing championship week and we start talking about all the things that are good and all the guys you need to put in your lineup, take out, stream, and just all the information you need to bring home that ring, let's talk about the 3 things that I learned in the semifinals going into championship week. This season has been the hardest of my 15 years of doing fantasy football. This season has been absolutely crazy with injuries and everything going on, and it's just crazy, and it's been one of the most stressful seasons of my life, and that's why you just never know. And like, I thought I would have all these guys that I started with and my team, and I was looking at it, and I have like 4 guys at this point that I drafted, and it's just crazy. It's just been really, really hard this season. And that's one of the things that I learned going into the semifinals. The second thing that I learned coming out of the semifinals, going to the championship week is don't go based off a name. Go off of production. You know, like I mentioned with Cordell Patterson and guys like that. And, you know, we always want to go off like, oh my God, I got Antonio Brown or I got Stephon Diggs on my team. I got to start them. No. You know, obviously Stephon Diggs is a different story, and maybe that wasn't a good example. But, you know, it's one of those things, go off of production, and, you know, like I said, who would have thought Isaiah McKenzie and T. Higgins and guys like that coming into week 1 were the guys that were going to put up these types of numbers to lead us to championship week. So you always want to go off of production and not go based off a name, because anything can happen and anybody could go off, and you always want to look at that. Just like St. Brown, Amon St. Brown from the Lions. He's been phenomenal, but he's not a flashy name like a Mike Evans or Justin Jefferson or even a Cooper Kupp. So always go off based on a production and not name. This season is just crazy. And I mentioned it a second ago. I never thought I would be relying on the guys that I am relying on, like Isaiah McKenzie, Sony Michel, T. Higgins, even Cordell Patterson. I've relied on him a lot since Derrick Henry's been out, even though he hasn't been very good. Javonte Williams, he's been very good consistently. Even Daryl Williams. Daryl Williams is going to be a little bit of a spoiler for my waiver wire pickups. He's in my top 5. Daryl Williams is, if CEH is out, and he's a guy that I didn't think I'd be starting in the championship week. But if he is starting and CEH is out, then I would definitely consider starting Daryl Williams this week. And it's just one of those things. It's been wild and it's been crazy. And it just, the guys that I thought I'd be relying on, like, you know, Mark Andrews, obviously. But there's just so many guys that, like, I did not think that I would be relying on, that I'm relying on. And there's guys I thought I'd be relying on that I can't rely on anymore because they're just very bad. So those are the 3 things that I learned going into the semifinals, or coming out of the semifinals and going into championship week. And, you know, I've given you everything that happened in week 16. We recapped all the information, but let's not waste any more time and let's start previewing week 17. Again, I can't even believe I'm saying this. It's the last week of the NFL fantasy football season. It's championship week. There's no next week. There's no you lose, you win, you come back next week. You win or you go home. It's time to take that trophy, take that ring, take the money, and take your bragging rights from your friends. So, your boy Tino is here to help you set your lineup and get all the guys you need to put in, take out, stream, bold prediction, waiver wires. I got all the information you need to set your lineups for championship week. So let's not waste any more time, and let's start it off how we always do on the previews for the upcoming weeks. Let's start off with my bold predictions. My first bold prediction for championship week is the Jaguars are going to upset the Patriots. And, you know, we saw it last week. The Lions trapped the Cardinals, and we thought the Cardinals were going to go off and have a phenomenal game. Start all your Cardinals. But it was the biggest trap game ever. And I said it last week, trap games are real. And I just feel like this could be another trap game. Yes, James Robinson is out. And yes, Trevor Lawrence has been playing very good, but I just feel like the Jaguars want to be that team to spoil the Patriots and spoil everything that they are doing right now. And Mac Jones is trying to beat Tom Brady at the 2000s. And I just, it could happen. So if it does, remember you heard it here first from your boy Tino. Josh Allen is going to go nuts on the rushing front, and he's going to have he's going to have over 150 rushing yards versus the Falcons. The Falcons' offense and defense, honestly, has not been very good, and I think Josh Allen isn't going to want to rely on Devin Singletary, and he's just going to take it himself. So I'm calling it. Josh Allen's going to put up 150 rushing yards, and that's 15 points, not even counting all the throwing and the passing touchdowns that he's going to throw. With all of the COVID injuries and everything going on, my last bold prediction of Week 17, the championship week, is that there is going to be a backup running back, or maybe even a backup player in general, that's going to score 30 points, and we're going to be talking about him next week, and we're going to be like, this guy is a guy that we had to rely on in championship week, and he put up these types of numbers, and now I'm sitting here as a champion because of him. I don't know who it could be. It could be the running back from the Jaguars, the backup running back. I don't even know how to say his name, and I don't want to say it wrong. So go look his name up. I can't say it at all, so we don't want to do that. It could be somebody, like Jeff Wilson or Ronald Jones. I don't know who it's going to be, but there's going to be some backup player that's going to score 30-plus points. Those are my 3 bold predictions for championship week. Now, let's start getting into the waiver wire, the starts, the sits, and the streams, and all the guys you need to pick up, start, sit, and stream. And just all these are the guys that we're going to be relying on going into championship week. And let's start off with the waiver wires. My top 5 waiver wire pickups are at number 5. It's the Eagles running backs. Depending on who starts, if it's Boston Scott or Jordan Howard going up against Washington football team, we saw what the Cowboys did. And obviously the Eagles aren't the Cowboys, and Jalen Hurts still runs the ball. But Boston Scott has been very productive when he's gotten the chance. And Jordan Howard has even been productive. And that's something that I never thought I'd be saying going into the championship week in 2021 of the NFL fantasy football season. But I'm saying it. You need to start and go pick up Jordan Howard or Boston Scott. Isaiah McKenzie, we've talked about a lot this guy. We've talked about him a lot already today. He's been in studs of the week. He was in all of the things, he went out and put on a show, and now the Bills get to go up against the Falcons, and I said Josh Allen's going to put up 150 rushing yards. He could put up 450 passing yards versus that defense. And Josh Allen could be that guy to score 60 fantasy points and lead you to a championship. So start Isaiah McKenzie, and if you haven't yet, go pick him up. Honestly, the only reason why I wouldn't go and pick him up is in my case, if you have Stephon Diggs or something like that, and I don't want to rely on 2 Buffalo Bills, and even though it is a good matchup, we don't want to do that in championship week. So that would be the only caveat of why I would not go pick up Isaiah McKenzie, is if you already have Stephon Diggs. Number 3, this tight end's been a phenomenal tight end the last 3 weeks. He costed me one of my weeks. He went out and put on another show and he caught a touchdown. Gerald Everett versus the Lions this week. Yes, Russell Wilson has not been very good in the passing game and everything, but Gerald Everett has been very productive when Russell does pass the ball. He did catch a touchdown, and now he gets to go up against the Lions. And yes, the Lions have been playing good football, but we always need tight ends. So a guy that has been very consistent, and with all of the injuries and Pat Freiermuth now being out, Travis Kelce unknown, Darren Waller being unknown, Kyle Pitts has been very good lately, but definitely if you need a tight end, go pick up Gerald Everett. Defense that I need you to pick up, can't even believe I'm saying this, but it's championship week, and I'm relying on my Chicago Bears. They're going up against Mike Glennon, the return of Mike Glennon, or Jake Fromm from State Farm, depending on who starts this week. But either way, who starts, the Bears' defense has been very good. Robert Quinn's been putting on a show. As long as Hakeem Hicks is in the game, nobody can get past him, and nobody's running the ball. So I think the Bears could put on a really good show, and they're a very good streaming defense this week versus the Giants. So I can't even believe I'm saying this, but I'm relying on my Bears in championship week. Daryl Williams, I talked about him a little bit earlier. I said it. If CEH is ruled out later on, go pick up Daryl Williams now, because if CH is ruled out, I definitely would consider starting Daryl Williams this week, because I think that it's going to be a very good game versus the Bengals, and I think it's going to be very high scoring, and it could be fantasy gold, and it could be one of those games that nobody plays defense and everybody just plays offense and they go berserk. So go pick up Daryl Williams versus the Bengals this week and put him in your lineup as long as CEH is out. And those are my top 5 waiver wire pickups for championship week. Now, let's get into the starts, the sits, and the streams for championship week. And these are the guys you need to put in your lineup, take out. And if you have the guys that we're going to sit, I'm going to give you some streamers that are going to lead you, and guys that you might not even think about starting in championship week. They could put up phenomenal numbers and just go berserk in championship week. And let's start off with the sits like we always do. My start at quarterback this week is the man that we've been relying on most of the season, pretty much all season long, Josh Allen. There's going to be a lot of guys on here that, you're obviously going to be starting, but I need to tell them, because you don't want to be crazy in the championship week, and you need to start your studs and start all the guys that you can rely on, and don't be crazy, and don't be starting guys that just because they had a good week last week doesn't mean they're going to have a good week this week. So Josh Allen versus the Falcons, you should be starting him either anyway, but make sure he's in your lineup. Tom Brady versus the Jets. Tom Brady is going to go berserk versus that Jets defense, and he might even be taken out in the fourth quarter, but that's okay as long as he puts up 30 plus fantasy points. That works for me. Rojo, Ronald Jones had 16.5 fantasy points last week, and he's going up against the Jets now, and honestly, you need to start all of your Buccaneers versus the Jets. 49ers running back Eli Mitchell or Jeff Wilson Jr., depending on who starts versus the Texans. Start whoever starts, because we saw what Justin Jackson did versus the Texans defense, and honestly, whoever starts for the 49ers next week is going to do the same. So start the 49ers versus the Texans next week. T. Higgins has been phenomenal all season long, and at this point, he's a guy you can't take out of your lineup, and you can't even think about sitting. He's a must start every single week, and it sucks that, it took so long for him to get going, but this guy could lead you to a championship this week, so if you have T. Higgins, start him versus the Chiefs. Antonio Brown versus the Jets. Again, every single Buccaneers player you need to start this week. Gronkowski, even Cameron Brate maybe if you're in a 2 tight end league and you're struggling at tight end, but Antonio Brown is a must-start at receiver for me. Gerald Everett is a must-start at this point now, and now he gets to go up against the Lions, and yes, the Lions have been playing very good, and like we said earlier, the Seahawks passing game isn't what we thought it was going to be all season long, but Gerald Everett has been very productive in the passing game. He got 10 points last week, he got a touchdown this week, so if you need a tight end and you're freaking out, and you have Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, go pick up Gerald Everett if he's still on your waiver wire and start him versus the Lions. Dawson Knox, I told you to start Josh Allen, and again, with the tight end position, Dawson Knox has been very productive and very consistent, and he's had a bad couple games, but he's been one of the guys we can consistently rely on, and again, versus the Falcons, that's going to be a really good matchup for the Josh Allen and all the Bills, honestly. So again, if you're in a pinch and you want to start Isaiah McKenzie, start Isaiah McKenzie. Make sure Stephon Diggs is in your lineup. Just start all your Bills. The defense that we're going to start this week, I'm going to give you 2 because it's championship week and we need all the help we can get. Both defenses are in the same division. You need to start the Bills versus the Falcons and the Patriots versus the Jaguars. The Patriots defense has been phenomenal. They're going up against the Jaguars. And yes, I said in my bold predictions that the Patriots could lose this game, but the Patriots defense has been very good and very consistent. So if you're freaking out and you need a defense, I would definitely consider starting the Patriots and the Bills. Make sure the Bills are in your lineup. They're going up against the Falcons, and Matt Ryan can't do anything right. Cordell Patterson, please, for the love of God, put up more than 8 points this week. I need you in championship week. But again, I might be sitting them this week depending on what happens later on and who's available. Speaking of my sits, though, let's get into my sits and the guys that you are going to need to sit in your lineup in championship week. And these guys I'm not too confident in championship week, and I'm just worried that they might cost you the week and cost you your title. Matthew Stafford versus the Ravens. Matthew Stafford threw 3 interceptions last week, and I hope the Ravens get a bunch of guys back. With the COVID, it's been absolutely ridiculous. And honestly, if the Ravens are at full strength, or if, in general, I think that Matthew Stafford is just not a good start this week versus that Ravens defense. Derek Carr versus the Colts. Yes, Kyler Murray had a really good game, but that has a lot to do with his rushing ability too, and Derek Carr doesn't have that. The Colts defense has been very good this season, so I would definitely be looking at a different quarterback besides Derek Carr this week. The Ravens running backs versus the Rams. The Rams defense is phenomenal. The Rams have, consistently stopped people, and they, yes, Alexander Mattison had a decent game last week, but he didn't have the type of game that we were hoping for being a must start and everything like that. But that's just because the Rams defense is good, and I really don't want to be relying on Devonta Freeman in championship week. Cordell Patterson. I can't even believe I'm saying this in championship week. And this is a guy I never thought we'd be saying this about after he's been so consistent all season long. But honestly, people, if you have a better option, and as long as everybody's healthy on your team and depending on who you have, unless you're completely desperate, I would consider sitting Cordell Patterson this week versus the Bills. The Bills' defense is really good. We don't know what the Falcons are going to do, and we got to hope that the Falcons can somehow figure out a way to get down the field, and that just doesn't seem to happen, and I really, really do not want to be screwed by Cordell Patterson on championship week. So I may have to start him, but if you have better options, and depending on who's healthy, and I have DeAndre Swift, I have Javonte Williams, I have Daryl Williams, I've stocked up on as many backup running backs as I possibly could, or running backs in general. So if you have a better option, and as long as those guys are healthy, I'd sit Cordell Patterson this week. Can't even believe I'm saying that. Jerry Judy versus the Chargers. Jerry Judy with Drew Lock as the quarterback. I just cannot deal with Drew Lock as the quarterback, so I cannot start Jerry Judy in championship week versus the Chargers. Russell Gage. Honestly, I'm staying away from all the Falcons in general. Maybe Kyle Pitts if you absolutely have to. But again, he could be a guy that puts up an absolute goose egg in championship week versus that Bills defense. And I just don't know how that game's going to go. And we need to make sure that we make the right decisions this week. So honestly, I would maybe start Cordell Patterson if you absolutely have to, depending on who's starting. And the only guy, honestly, I would be very positive about starting on the Falcons is Kyle Pitts. The tight ends that I'm sitting is the Browns tight ends, Austin Hooper, David Njoku versus the Steelers. I just cannot deal with Baker Mayfield, and just that whole offense is ridiculous. Hunter Henry, we talked about him in the disappointments. He hasn't been as good as we thought he was going to be. And, he had those 4 out of 5 games where he caught a touchdown. But we saw what happens with the touchdown, because you catch a touchdown that's 6 points, and, you get a couple catches throughout the game. You get double-digit fantasy points. But relying on that touchdown, and, the Jags might want to spoil, and we talked about a trap game possibly. So I don't know if I can start and rely on Hunter Henry in championship week. The Chiefs defense, yes, they've been very good, but they're going up against the best offense right now, and Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, CJ Uzomah, Tyler Boyd. I can go on and on and on and name everybody on that team, but we don't want to do that, and you may need to make sure you start all your Chiefs and Bengals. But I don't want any part of the defenses in this game, because there's going to be no defenses, and hopefully this game is just straight fantasy gold. But now that I gave you the guys you needed to sit, let's talk about the guys you can stream this week, and they might lead you to a championship if you're worried about some guys, or you're worried about the guys that I just mentioned in the sits. My streaming quarterbacks this week, and this one might be a very deep sleeper, and this one is more because of the rushing ability in deeper leagues and 2 quarterback leagues. Don't be crazy, like I said, in an 8-team or 10-team league. Don't be crazy and start this guy over Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, stuff like Patrick Mahomes, stuff like that. But Trey Lance could be a very sneaky play this week versus the Texans. We saw what Justin Jackson did versus the Texans, and Trey Lance has a very good rushing ability, just like Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. So if you are desperate at quarterback, you're in championship week in 2 quarterback leagues, or if you're in a deep 14 to 16 team league. If I was in the championship week in one of my leagues, it was a 12 team league, I may have considered starting them, but I got eliminated. So Trey Lance versus the Texans is a very sneaky stream this week. Carson Wentz versus the Raiders. I'm sorry, I almost said the Ravens. So Carson Wentz has been very good. Michael Pittman, Jack Doyle, Jonathan Taylor still in the game, best running back in the game right now. T.Y. Hilton, Carson Wentz has been very good this year. So, versus the Raiders, I think this game could be very high scoring. So, again, if you're in a pinch and you're freaking out about quarterbacks because of everything going on in football right now, then I would definitely consider starting Carson Wentz at quarterback this week. Rashad Penny versus the Lions. The Lions, they are what they are, but we saw what Rashad Penny did last week versus the Chicago Bears, and I think that would be very much the same production. So, start Rashad Penny versus the Lions this week. Boston Scott or Jordan Howard. I talked about it in my waiver wires to go pick up Boston Scott or Jordan Howard, and depending on who starts, you might even consider starting both of them. Not obviously both of them on the same team, but if you have one or the other, I would definitely consider starting both of them because I think both of them could be very productive. Kadarius Toney versus the Bears. The Bears passing defense has been very bad, and yes, their defense has been very good lately, and they're going to be and I told you to pick them up and start them, but Kadarius Toney, I think, could be very productive, and he could get a lot of receptions and a lot of yards, and I don't know how many points the Giants are going to get, but Kadarius Toney could still put up numbers with receptions and yards, and I take that all day long. And those are my wide receivers that you need to stream this week. Let's get to one more receiver to stream this week. I'm sorry, I only gave you one receiver. Let's get to the other receiver you need to stream this week. The other receiver that you need to stream this week, I'm sorry, I don't know why I thought I did two. I only did one. But Isaiah McKenzie, we've talked about him a lot this episode. If Cole Beasley and Gabriel Davis is out, I would definitely consider streaming Isaiah McKenzie because he is one of those guys that I talked about earlier. I didn't think I would be relying on a guy named Isaiah McKenzie. It sounds like a WWE superstar, but it's one of those things that you just never know in fantasy football. The two tight ends that you need to stream this week is Cole Kmet versus the Giants. Yes, Nick Foles and Jimmy Garoppolo have a very good connection, and if Justin Fields is back, I think that Cole Kmet could be a very good play. But if for some reason Nick Foles does start again, you might even be considering starting Jimmy Graham, and that is only because of the tight end position being as bad as it is. CJ Uzomah, I've talked about it. I want every part of the Bengals offense this week. I think that game's going to be fantasy galore, fantasy gold, and just everybody's going to score points. So start CJ Uzomah versus the Chiefs. And I talked about him earlier. I told you to pick him up this week. It's the Bears versus the Giants. They are my streaming defense of the week. And again, I said it earlier, can't even believe I'm relying on my Chicago Bears to possibly bring me home a championship. But they have a very good matchup versus the Giants. And Mike Glennon can't get going. Saquon can't get going. Jake from State Farm might start the game. Who knows who might be starting for quarterback for the Bears. But that defense has been very good. Robert Quinn's been very good. We've seen so many. Roquan Smith's been very productive, and So the Bears have a very good chance to put up in numbers, and honestly, they get some sacks and get a pick six. I'll take that all day long. But those are my starts, sits, and streams for championship week. So if you need to, make sure you get all of those guys in your lineup and you're feeling good about bringing home that title, and you want to be confident about your lineups. That's the one thing I'm going to say before we get into my next segment. You need to be confident about the guys you're going to start because you don't want to be sitting there in championship week freaking out. You want to have confidence. You want to have fun rooting for your team in championship week because, you don't know if you'll be here next year. So take advantage of it as you can. And, I gave you guys that possibly could go bananas and guys that were studs of the week earlier and guys that led you to the championship. So instead of doing my top 5 flex options for week 17, the championship week, I'm going to give you my top 5 guys that I think could score 25 plus points this week and lead you to a championship. And we'll be talking about them on Studs of the Week next week. Mark Andrews versus the Rams. Mark Andrews has been the most consistent tight end. He's put up 25 plus fantasy points. I think he's actually put up 60 plus points in the playoffs. And if you have him like I do, he's been carrying me on his back and he led me to the championship week. So if you have Mark Andrews, he's quarterback proof. Don't matter if I'm throwing him the ball. Mark Andrews is going to be scoring touchdowns and you'll be feeling real good on Sunday when you see Mark score 2 touchdowns. Jalen Waddle put on an absolute show on Monday night. He caught 10 receptions, 92 yards, and a touchdown. And now he gets to go up against the Titans. And Tua Tagovailoa has not been very good, but he loves Jalen Waddle. So if you have Jalen Waddle could possibly put up 25 plus points versus the Titans. And, I'm saying that it's going to happen, and I'm hoping it doesn't because I'm facing them in my championship week, and I can't let Jalen do that because, I just can't let Jalen make me lose, and I want to bring home the championship. So I think it can happen, but in my case, I don't want it to happen. Devonta Adams, Aaron Rodgers' favorite receiver. Can't even believe I'm saying it, but I've been relying on Mr. Aaron Rodgers all season long. Devonta Adams has been a very productive receiver all season like he always is, and Aaron Rodgers could be leading me to a championship. Versus the Vikings on Sunday night, I think Devonta Adams and Aaron Rodgers are going to go berserk, and I think that Devonta Adams could score two or three touchdowns and 100+ receiving yards. And if you have Devonta Adams, you're going to be feeling real good on Sunday night going to sleep. On Sunday night, waking up Monday morning with Devonta Adams, putting on a show, and you'll be like, hell yeah, I'm taking home that title. Number 4, Rojo, Ronald Jones going up against the Jets. I told you to start him this week, and he scored 16+ points last week, and I think that he could have a very good game, and he could easily score 30 points versus the Jets. So Rojo might be that guy that leads you to a championship. Stefon Diggs versus the Falcons is the last guy I think could score 25+ points, and there's a lot of guys, obviously, like guys, guys that we're relying on. And, you might be like, these are guys we obviously know could score big points. But, that's what it's about. You need to make sure you make the right decisions. It's not about being crazy this week. It's about relying on the guys you drafted that's been there all season long, consistent every single week, and led you here. Don't be crazy and don't be nuts. So, yes, there's a lot of guys on here that we obviously are starting, but you need to make sure and you have all these guys in your lineup, and just don't be crazy. It's championship week. But those are my top 5 guys that I think can lead us to a championship, and we'll be talking about them on Studs of the Week. Now let's get into 3 games that are going to be fantasy gold for championship week. Cincinnati Bengals versus the Kansas City Chiefs. We've talked about it all episode long about the Bengals offense, so continuously start the Bengals. Every Bengals receiver, running back, Joe Burrow, make sure they're in your lineup. Make sure to start Patrick Mahomes. Hopefully Travis Kelce comes back. Daryl Williams, depending on what happens with CEH throughout the week. Maybe even a deep sleeper, Brian Pringle. He was on Studs of the Week this week. Maybe he'll score 25 points again. Hopefully Tyreek Hill goes off for you, but make sure you start all your Chiefs and Bengals. The Rams and Ravens. And you might be saying, like, why the Rams and Ravens? You said to sit Matthew Stafford. But this is a game I think that possibly could be a game that, maybe the Rams get up and the Ravens got to come back. Hopefully Lamar Jackson comes back. But we talked about it with Mark Andrews a second ago. He's quarterback proof, and you could start him every single week. Rashad Bateman got a touchdown, and that was Josh Johnson that threw it to him. So if you are in a deep bind, maybe start Rashad Bateman. Maybe, possibly, depending on who the quarterback is. I don't know. But the last game that's going to be fantasy gold for championship week, it's Sunday night. I just talked about it with Devonta Adams and Aaron Rodgers. The Vikings and Packers, you need to make sure you start everybody in that game. Yes, the Packers defense is good, but the Vikings are going to have to come back in some sort of capacity. Justin Jefferson could have a very good game. Depending on what the status is of Dalvin Cook, I would consider starting Alexander Madison. But again, that's a very difficult case because it's Sunday night. And again, it's championship week. And we don't want to be relying on guys and then they don't start and you get screwed and you're thinking about this for the next 6 months. Because again, this is the last week. There's no way, there's no next week. There's no, we get a shot at coming back. This is the last week, and I'm sorry if you've been eliminated, but for people like me that are fighting for a championship and that did awful last year in all of his leagues, I want to take home this title as bad as I want to move out of my mom's basement. Hopefully everybody will laugh at that, but everybody will laugh at that. But yeah, those are my 3 games that are going to be fantasy gold for week 17 championship week. And before we go, like we always do here at Tino's Time, let's do my 3 guarantees for championship week. And these are the 3 things that are going to happen this week. And you're going to be feeling good. And if you have this happen, you're going to be bringing home that title. Tom Brady's going to go berserk versus the Jets. Let's be real. And yes, this might be a trap game and everything, but he's Tom Brady, he's the GOAT, greatest of all time. He's winning Super Bowls in 2000, 2007, 2020. He's had 4 different careers. It's just crazy. If you haven't, go watch that Man in the Arena on ESPN Plus. It's phenomenal, and it's just awesome to see. But Brady's going to go berserk versus the Jets. Josh Allen also going to destroy the Falcons. Hopefully, he puts up a bunch of numbers. He throw to Stephon Diggs about 40 times. Have him have a T. Higgins type of a day. That's what I need in one of my leagues. But yeah, Josh Allen's going to go berserk. Something unpredictable is going to happen. I guarantee you it, people. Next week, we're going to be sitting here, and right now I'm thinking, and I'm saying all these guys, but there's going to be a guy that we're going to be talking about, like Isaiah McKenzie, or, Craig Reynolds a few weeks ago, Amon St. Brown, like 3 weeks ago. There's going to be a guy like that we're going to be talking about, and this guy's going to be on hashtag that helps nobody, and this guy's just going to be on everything, and he's going to be the guy that nobody thought to start, and he's going to be the reason why maybe he'll be the flyer that you pick up and start. But there's going to be something unpredictable happen. It happens all season long. I guarantee you it. It's going to happen. So those are my 3 guarantees for Week 17 Championship Week. And there you have it, people. There's been 17 weeks, an extra week added to the season. COVID galore, COVID injuries, big names go on the IR, big names out for the season. Guys go and take a break from the NFL. We've seen guys that go bananas and we don't even know who their names are. We've seen guys that nobody thought we'd be relying on. It's been a wild fantasy football season, people. If you survived and you're in the championship like I am in one of my leagues, or maybe you're in the championship in more of your leagues, and hopefully I was a big reason on why, and hopefully I helped you as much as I possibly could all season long. But this is your time. This is your time. Not listen to anybody. This is your time to make your own decisions. There's a reason why you got here. There's a reason on why you're in the championship. And, it could be because you sat on the waiver wire. It could be because you sat there and, you did your homework every single week. Maybe you listen to your boy Tino every week. Hopefully you listen to your boy Tino. I try my best to give you all the information. But don't take any advice. Yes, I want you to listen to my show, but at the end of the day, it comes down to your own decision, and go with your gut, people, because like I said, this is the last week of the season, and if you want to take home the championship, if you want to take home all the money, make sure you do, and you know what you feel comfortable doing, because some leagues, maybe you're playing for $1,200, maybe $400, maybe you're even just playing for $100, or maybe you're just playing for bragging rights and there's no money involved. Whatever it may be, fantasy football is one of the big reasons on why I love football so much, and a big reason on why it makes the NFL season so much better, because for me, I'm a Bears fan. The Bears aren't very good, but I always look forward to having fantasy football. And this season has been very crazy and very long and wild with everything going on in COVID and all the games being pushed back. We don't know who's going to start. So I just want you to know and just make sure that you always go with your gut, and make sure that you go with your right decision, and make sure you feel comfortable about your lineup this week, because I'll be back next week, don't you worry, to recap championship week, and hopefully we are all celebrating a victory, and hopefully we can bring the confetti and bring the trophy and bring the money and bring whatever you're fighting for in the championship, and hopefully you're celebrating, and hopefully you're a hopefully you're a champion by this time next week. If I'm a champion, maybe I'll bring out my WWE belt and I'll just be like, I am the champion of the world. But let's not get too confident. Let's worry about that next week after you take home the dub. So I hope all of this information helps. I hope everybody listens. Don't forget to subscribe. Smash that like button. Go follow at TinoTime1996 on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, all your social medias. Subscribe. I do fantasy football. We still got wrestling. Baseball's around the corner. Can't even believe I'm saying that already. There's so much coming up here on Tino's Time, so don't forget to go smash it, go like it, and just help your boy Tino out. So, until next week, when we recap everything that happened in championship week and we say goodbye to the fantasy football season, this is your boy Tino saying goodbye, but you know what? Don't you worry, because I will be back week 18, and we'll be doing a week 18 prediction show, and we'll be talking about all of the action that's going down in week 18, and we'll be previewing all the games, the playoff possibilities, and all of the teams and everybody that could possibly be in the playoffs, because the playoffs have been wild this season, as everybody knows. So get excited and look forward to that, because I'll be here all season long during the playoffs. You won't get rid of me after the fantasy football season. Your boy Tino will still be here every single week, except we'll be doing the playoff predictions on Wednesdays, but that's okay. So again, good luck to everybody in championship week. I hope we're celebrating those dubs and all the championships next week. And until the fantasy football season is over and the dust settles, and yeah. So until next week, when we do everything and we cover championship week, and like I said, I just want to keep reminding everybody, keep doing your thing, keep setting your lineups, and go with your gut this week. So again, I know I've repeated it like 7 times, but that's okay. So until next week, when we recap championship week and we cover everything and we talk about all the guys that led you to a ring, and I'll be giving you some 2022 predictions. This is your boy Tino, signing out.